Good afternoon or evening, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to an extra special episode of Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and I'm here with Tony Robinson today, where we're going to be talking with Accrington Stanley midfielder Sam Findlay. Now, Sam has had a career that has taken him all over the UK. He has spent some time in Wales. Also played for AFC Fylde before coming over to Accrington. So really excited to hear all about Sam's career. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to having a good chat with you, Sam, and learning about your past and how things are going with you at Stanley. I hope you and your family are all well during this crisis.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
It really is.
How scary it's got. Yeah, it's frightening, to be honest with you. I don't think we're not on complete lockdown over here yet. I think they've advised not to leave the house, but they haven't completely said, like, don't be leaving the house. Do you know what I mean? They haven't come out and said, don't be leaving the house. So I think that's going to be the next step. I don't know what they're waiting for, because I'm seeing in most of the other countries that's what's getting said. So I don't know what's going to go on with it.
I did read a story on the weekend that's kind of disturbing. Was the Belarus Football League over there were still playing league matches, which is just absolutely in this time is absolutely ludicrous.
It is, yeah, it is. Have they still got fans going there as well? Do you know?
Yeah, they had. They said they had 3,000 fans at the one match. So. It's just it boggles the mind that's still going on.
Yeah, I saw that article.
Especially if the football fans are still going to the game. I was a bit weird. I went when Liverpool played Atletico Madrid in the Champions League. I went there. I went to the game because obviously I'm a mad Liverpoolian. So I was at that game, and I was a little bit worried because Madrid was having a bit of a tough time with it, and then 3,000 of them come to the game. I was a little bit wary about whether to go or not, but obviously I went and they beat us and whatever. But yeah, even them coming over they were in obviously Liverpool for the whole day. Some might have come over the day before and had a night over. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and you don't want to talk about the last half hour at that the Liverpool match, then, do you?
I don't know. No.
So now you played with Everton as a youth, but now you're a Liverpool supporter. How did that come to be?
I was training with both. You can't sign pro forms until you're 9 years of age. So I was just playing for a local side that my dad helped run at the time. It was called La Belfry. I was only I think I was 5. We were 5 playing in the under-7s league. We were playing 2 leagues above, and we got you get battered every week, and it was a good learning curve for us, to be honest with you, because obviously they never had teams back then. The youngest team they had was under-7, so we just jumped in that league, see how we could cope, and we were getting beat 10-0, 11-0 and whatever. But then the next year we went and won the league. We never lost a game the year after, so I think that was a bit of a development curve for us, seeing the disappointment. And then once we jumped up at the next year and we were used to playing there, then we won. And I got spotted then by Liverpool scouts, and Everton scouts used to come to the Hightown League, it was at the time. It's still going now. They used to be up there regularly, the scouts, and they asked me to come down and train. It was called like a satellite system back then. It was like a development team, before you get to sign when you're 9. So I was training with Everton on Monday and Wednesday nights, and training with Liverpool on Tuesday and Thursday nights through to 5 years of age, and then I had to make the decision which I preferred. And my dad's a mad Liverpoolian, to be honest with you. My dad's got a cop season ticket holder, and I'm obviously a mad Liverpoolian, but I just like to feel better at Everton. I didn't really like the feel at Liverpool for some reason. The coaches were a lot better at Everton. I enjoyed me football there at Everton, and I had to sit down. Obviously, I was only 9 years of age, but I had to sit down and talk with my dad, and he said, look, whatever you enjoy, son, don't be swayed by Liverpool just because you support Liverpool. Everton could be the right choice for you, and I enjoyed every minute of my time playing for Everton, so and it wasn't really too bad.
We've got a lot of players that we've talked to that have come out of Everton, in the youth academy, the youth system, and everybody seems to have really positive comments about their time at Everton and how it helped to sort of start their career. I can just picture Jimmy Bell and John Coleman standing outside the training ground waiting for players to come out and recruiting them,
Definitely, yeah. They're both Liverpool through and through. But I still am. I just, at the time, like I said, I just enjoyed. Obviously, I was going there 2 nights a week at both academies, and I just enjoyed the coaching and Tony Farrell, Tosh, was a coach at Everton at the time, and I think he's been over to America and started at a coaching academy over. I can't remember. Might have been Boston. Might have been over in Boston for a while, and done well over there. But he was one of the main influences for me when I was at Everton. He was a top coach, and he was like a father figure type of thing. He made you so welcome and made you enjoy your football. So he was probably a swaying point for me.
And now, once you left Everton, you had a couple stops at Southport and also Warrington Town. But the one that really jumped out to me is that in 2010, you actually went to Wales and you spent close to 5 seasons with the New Saints, and that was a big part of your early career. So tell us about how did you get over to the Welsh League, and what was it like playing there?
Yeah, I was playing for Warrington at the time, and there was a manager from Craig Harrison, he was called. He played for Middlesbrough in the Premier League, and I've met him again when I played at Fylde. He got the Hartlepool job at Fylde. He come down to watch. He was at Airbus at the time. Club Airbus were in the Welsh Premier, and he tried to sign me from Warrington. I was on a contract at Warrington, actually, funny enough, at 17 years of age. They had me, was part-time. They don't really have you on a non-contract terms where clubs can come in and put 7 days in you and just take you type of thing. But I was on a contract at Warrington, so I thought they might have been backing themselves a little bit and thinking, we could get a little bit of money out of this player here. But yeah, I went and spoke with Craig about going to Airbus, and then didn't really fancy it. He was offering me a job in the factory that was still only part-time, so I didn't really see what was worth it. And then obviously he was trying to sell the Welsh League to me, and I knew there was a lot of travelling, so I gave it a miss. And then a week later he got the manager's job at TNS. Obviously called me up again and said, look, how would you like to come and play full-time football? And I bit his hands off straight away. I think they spoke to Warrington and agreed whatever they agreed with Warrington, and I was on my way, back into full-time football, which obviously I wanted to do from when I was a child, and wasn't to be at Everton, and then I went part-time a little bit and jumped straight back into full-time football with TNS, and I loved it there, yeah.
I just said I was just going to ask about the name of the club in Wales. I'm looking at it. It's got to be one of the longest names I've ever seen for a football club. And the town it's in, could you pronounce the name of the town that it's in?
It's in Oswestry, Llantyfryd and Oswestry, maybe. Is that right?
Yeah, I couldn't. I was thinking it was Clan something, but I wouldn't. I wasn't going to take a stab at it. That's why I was wondering if you.
In Welsh, in Welsh terms, it might be with the double L. It might be Llacla. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't really pick the language up when I was there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm still working on pronouncing all the English town names myself. I haven't even gotten to Wales yet.
And I bet you're struggling with me today as well, being a Scouser. You might be struggling.
Oh no, not at all. We talked to everybody from Liverpool because John Coleman obviously has a lot of Liverpool guys on the team. Yeah. So first person we ever interviewed on the show was Scott Brown. And one thing that you guys actually kind of have a lot in common, because he was an Everton Academy guy.
Yeah.
He's at Warrington now. But But one thing I noticed was that when he left, that you took the number 8 shirt. Was there any significance to that?
No, yeah, you know what? The gaffer, I was number 14 when I first signed, and I've always loved the number 8 shirt because obviously I've always loved Steven Gerrard and whatever. So I've always liked to be number 8. I was number 8 at CNS. I was number 8 at Fylde, and then I don't know. No, to be honest with you, I never asked for that number. When Scotty unfortunately left the club, which I was gutted about because I love Scott Brown, he's a great player and the top lad off the pitch, and obviously it wasn't to be at Accrington. He chose Harrogate, and good luck to him. And I went and seen Scott. I was with Scotty last week actually. Went and seen him and had a few beers with Scotty. No, the gaffer picked that number. Obviously, I was 14 in the first season when I signed, and when Scotty left, the number it's not like at the Premier League level, as you probably know with Accrington. It's not like there isn't really players that go in and ask for certain numbers. We just get told in pre-season the gaffer write the list of numbers, and they're the numbers that you get, type of thing. You get what you're given, and I was number 8, so. He's put a little bit of faith in me to change me from 14 to number 8. You know what I mean? I know there's stupid numbers now where lads have got they like number 60 and they like 88 and they like 90 and things like that. But with the old school 1 to 11, it's obviously it's a key number, isn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I think 8 is just one of those iconic numbers where. You have that number 8 shirt, that usually means that you're kind of that spine guy in the midfield, if you will, the guy
exactly,
that kind of it goes both ways on offense and defense. And you certainly fit that mold. Just kind of pulling a few of your stats up here. I mean, you recently it came about on Twitter that you're one of the top dribblers in the league. You've completed over 60% of your dribbles. I was also looking over some other stats here. I see you've won 58 tackles this year. You've drawn 44 fouls. So, I mean, you're just kind of filling up the stat sheet and a great all-around player and really settling into that number 8 role, if you will, even if it's not
definitely. I see them myself. I get notifications on Twitter and I see them and they're good to see you. I think there was a week, or it might have been a 2-week period where I think I might have been top of the tackles and I might have been second on the dribbles, and there was another stat, and it might have been D3D football, maybe one of the stat Twitters, and he put me up within he put my them stats up within a week, and I private messaged him saying, "Look, are you trying to get some money out of me? Or do I need to pay you for this?" And he just messaged me back saying, "No, it's okay. I just like to see lower league players getting the recognition he deserves," which was nice of him, to be honest with you. He doesn't get paid or. He just does it for his own sort of recognition. He doesn't get paid to do it. So yeah, it's lovely, to be honest.
They're one of our favorite sites, and they kind of they have the same mindset that we do, and we love all of the stats. And speaking of the dribbling percentage I was talking about earlier, that was one that I actually got from them, and that's D3, D4 football. You can find them at D4 football on Twitter. But it was 67% of your dribbles have been successful this year, which is actually second in all of League One.
Yeah. I don't know what that is. I don't know how that's come about, to be honest with you, coming from. Because you know the formation that we play, and it's not as if I'm a number 10 player where I'm getting the ball and standing players up and dancing past them, or like a Messi type of thing. I wouldn't say I was that type of player. So that was the one that shocked me a little bit there. I don't know how they've worked out what the class as a dribble and pass players, but yeah, I was surprised with that one. Obviously one I'm made up with, but I wouldn't class myself as like a dribbler. I think that Jurgen Clark, who was on your show not long ago, I would have thought he was top. He would have been up there because the type of player that he is more getting at fullbacks and taking them on and more of a skillful player. So yeah, I was surprised with that, to be honest with you.
I noticed when you're playing, and when I've seen you play live, and you get into a position where there's where that sort of triangle formation where you've got a couple other players and the play is tight, and you know that interaction between the give and go and type thing. And then when you're quick on the turn to get past the defender, I'm just wondering if a lot of that helps build your stats.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
That's exactly what I was going to say too. Is I think you're positioning it. Ice hockey and Tony will be very familiar with this term. In ice hockey, they have what's called the neutral zone, which is kind of the area that's on the right on either side of center ice. So soccer doesn't have those lines on the field, but if a soccer pitch had a neutral zone, I feel like you're the guy that transitions the ball through that neutral zone. And I think that's what you were looking at too, Tony, right?
Yeah, I think that number 8 and number 10 role seem to play between the two boxes, if you will. But and then in your play too, Sam, you'll go over to the sideline and you'll play in the middle. So you've got a lot of area, and you'll get into some, as I was mentioning, you get into some tight traffic where you need to do that give and go to sort of move to advance the ball.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and as you said there, like with the triangles, I feel like I've got a great relationship with Callum Johnson and Jordan Clark on that right side.
Yes,
obviously we get our stats, we get our clips sent over to us by John Doolan. Every time he touched the ball after games, he emails them over to us, and it's interesting to watch them back on the Instat. You literally just press play, and it's every time you touch the ball. It's like, obviously depending on how many times you touch the ball, it's like a 10-minute video, and every time you touch the ball, it shows. So, or every time you're near the ball or interact towards the ball. So I watch them quite a lot after games, and most of my play is down that right hand side with Callum and Clifford, as I said, and I like to think we've got a great little relationship. We're all on the same wavelength. We know where other players are before we even receive the ball, and you hit the nail on the head with the triangle there. I'd like to think I was like the point of the triangle towards the centre, and then you've got Callum and Clifford and a great relationship down that right hand side.
Yeah, and then you got that release where Clark will take off down the wing, and either you can advance the ball to him or Callum's in that position. But that play it seems to be where I sit. I've seen that several times when I've been there. Is that sort of play, and it's really intricate to watch and enjoyable to watch, because it's a question: are you going to release, or is Clark going to release? And who's going to get the ball, and it works. Yeah, it does. I think I've got a great, no disrespect to the left hand side, or because I like to play there, and I like to play diagonal passes and things like that. But I just feel like I've got a great relationship on that right hand side with Callum and Jordan. But Jimmy Bell probably won't be too happy with it, because he's always screaming on the side for me to stay in the centre of the pitch and don't vacate the middle of the pitch, because obviously we've only got 2 in the middle, and most teams play a 3 against us. So Jimmy's always having a heart attack, nearly having a heart attack on the side, saying, don't vacate the midfield. But then sometimes you've got to vacate the midfield to create them attacking positions that Callum on the overlap gets into and Clifford gets on the ball. Sometimes you've got to, otherwise you can't just rely on creating things. I think a centre mid's got to create a lot of the attacks for teams.
One thing that Callum had told us when he came on the show was he had mentioned how important that film study is that you were just talking about it. Is that something where you and Callum and Jordan will all sit down and watch that together and kind of formulate your game plans that way?
You know what? I'd be lying if I told you that we did that. I'd be lying. No, we haven't. We haven't actually sat down together and do that. I think it's just a wavelength type of thing. It's just I'd like to think we've all got good football brains, and we see pitches before we receive the ball, and we know where each other are before we receive the ball. So if I'm receiving the ball in a tight area, like you said before, I know that I can play one first time round a corner to Jordan, and he's going to be there. and he won't lose the ball because he's great with his feet in tight pockets. And then there's always Callum on the overlap going down the right-hand side. So, no, we haven't actually sat down and looked at it together, but I think we probably not. I'm not saying we don't need to because obviously you can always get better, and not, I wouldn't say it works every single time, but I'd like to think percentage-wise it works more than it doesn't, and yeah, maybe we should sit down and review it and be like, look, we're getting success from this. Why don't we keep trying to do this? Yeah, it's not a bad shout, to be fair.
I like what you're saying about being sort of looking at advance. I think the professional player are always one step ahead, looking in their mind, where the fan watching the match or watching the ball where it is and what's going on. And you're already formulating in your mind what your options are even before you get the ball. And that's something that differentiates you from sort of the average player or fan, doesn't it? Because you have to think in the future.
Of course, and that's what I've found the biggest step up from playing non-league and conference level, and even in the Welsh League. I think that jumping from the conference up to League One, I think that's been the biggest factor for me. The intensity, the pace of the game, and reading the game. Decision making when you're on the ball. Like if in the conference, or I'm not disrespecting the conference or non-league football because it's a great standard of football, but the higher up you go, I think decision-making wise, you get punished. You get punished if you give the ball away, and you get punished if you're not thinking them 2-3 passes ahead. If you're just releasing the ball to someone,
yeah,
just saying, yeah, you have the ball, you think what to do with it next, and that's when you get found out. You need to see them pitches in your head. You need to give Callum the ball, knowing that he can gallop forwards. You need to put it into his space, or you need to give it to Jordan, knowing that he can turn on and get at his fullback. So yeah, I think that is the difference. The higher up you go, I'd say you get more time on the ball. Funnily enough, the higher up you go, you get more time on the ball. But it's the decisions you make on the ball that are important.
I think that's something that we've heard from just about every guy that's come on the show that maybe did play in the conference or even League Two. Is just each tier that you move up, that the individual errors get punished more. And I think that's what you were getting at.
Yeah, definitely. Like you just can't give these other teams chances who you're playing against them. Because you're playing against top players who most of them have played at the highest level, whether they're on the way down or whether they're building the way back up. I don't know, but some of the players that you're playing against, it's frightening. Do you know what I mean? Like last year we played against Aidan McGeady. I've just been watching Premier League's best goals from 2004, 2005, and he's playing for Everton, scoring goals for Everton, and you're playing against him on the pitch. Do you know what I mean? It's just like
you
can't give these players time and space, or they'll punish you.
Another thing I wanted just to touch on, what you were mentioning about this level where you may have sometimes more time to develop the play, and at the lower leagues where maybe the defenders or people are rushing in to get the tackle, or they're not processing the number of opportunities or chances. Whereas at this level, if I'm a defender, I'm looking at you and I'm saying I only got 20% chance of getting that ball off of Sam. I'm not gonna challenge him now. I'm gonna hang back a bit.
Yeah, I'm gonna hang back and wait for the cavalry. Yeah.
Yeah, the thought process is they're analyzing more opportunities, and therefore the decision process to rush in is a lot different. Or the high percentage play would be to let the play develop.
1,000,000%, and Mark Hughes is a prime example for that. You watch, some people might come and watch Mark Hughes and think, oh, he's finished, he can't run, you only have to get in behind him. But I'm telling you now, he's the best centre-half I've ever played with. I obviously haven't played at a great level, but the way he reads the game, it's frightening. He's 2-3 steps ahead of most people, and I think that proves with the centre-half partnerships who've played with him down the years, have always gone on to do well.
Yeah, I've always said
I was talking about that. I was talking about that last week with him, to be honest with you. I was talking to Mark about that last week. He was saying the amount of centre-back partnerships that I've played with who've gone on to get a move, who are playing in the Championship and higher now. He said, I think there's about 6 or 7 of them. So I think they've learned and read what Mark does and learned a lot of lessons off him. And then gone and kicked on and done well. So it's testament to how good he is at reading the game and how good people can pick up on little things. And Ross Sykes is doing the same at the minute. You know, Ross is only a young lad. I know the size of him. You wouldn't think he was only 19, or I think he's just turned 20 actually. But he's learning a lot from Mark already, and it's showing.
Mark and Ross have really formed a formidable duo back there, and you can really see Ross, how far he's come this season over last. It's just incredible.
I think Mark Hughes now, in his time at Stanley, I think he's playing the best football of his career, actually.
Yeah, I think he's been brilliant. Yeah, I've obviously only been here a season last season, and I could tell straight away from how good of a player he was, and he wasn't lack with the greatest of pace, but what he makes up for and how much he reads the game. He doesn't really need the pace. He reminds me of like a Sammy Hippier type at Liverpool. Everyone used to talk about Sammy Hippier and say he's slow, you can get in behind him, but he never got done in behind. He always read the game so well, and very rare that strikers get any chances against him, and that's what I think Mark's like.
I just wanted to sort of recognize a couple of things that I know people would know, but at your time with New Saints, you won 4 league championships, 2 Welsh Cups, and a Welsh League Cup. And you also got into the Europa League. Is that correct?
Yeah, we played in the Champ. I think 3 seasons we played in the Champ. Oh, it might have been 4. Or did we play? Did you go into it? It's a mad system. You win the league and you go into the Champions League qualifiers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then you've got to win 2 of them games to then. If you win your first game in a Champions League qualifier, depends on what round you go in. You play a second round qualifier. If you win that one if you lose that one, I think then you go into the Europa League qualifier. I can't remember how many times we played in the Europa League qualifier, but I think we played in the Champions League qualifier 3 or 4. It might have been 3 or 4 times. Yeah, because every time you win the league, you'd obviously then go into the Champions League qualifiers, and yeah, they were brilliant. That was what winning that league was built up to, because the club obviously got a lot of money from UEFA
right.
and things like that, and you used to get to go to the foreign countries and play against some top sides, and it was always a great experience. And
I think
some of the sides that you played against in the Champions League, do you remember?
I played against, I think on the Wikipedia page it says Anderlecht. I think everyone seems to say I played against Anderlecht, but that was a bit before my time. They did play Anderlecht, but that was before my time. I think the first season we played Helsingborg in Sweden. They were a good side. We drew 0-0 with them at home, and then got beat 3-0 away at their place. I think Henrik Larsson he wasn't playing, but I think he's got something to do with them over there. That was a great experience over in Sweden. We played Legia Warsaw the year after, Polish side.
Right.
We got beat 3-1 at home. We played at Wrexham's ground because they brought 7,000 fans over. And
wow!
The New Saints' ground wasn't big enough to play it there, so we had to play at Wrexham Stadium. We got beat 3-1 at home there, and we drew 0-0 away. Oh no, we got beat 1-0 away, I think. But they're obviously a top side. They're massive. They're huge. Them Legia Warsaw over in Poland. And then the year after that, we played Slovan Bratislava, I think.
Oh, okay.
In Slovakia. We went over there and played them. And
these are all massive clubs within whatever league that they're in. These are the
they're all top clubs. Yeah, that's
PSG of their country.
League, yeah.
Well, I think it's a league. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I say. It's playing in the Welsh League. Although it doesn't get a lot of recognition because some of the top Welsh clubs obviously play in the English system. But when you win the league, you're getting some exposure that you wouldn't normally get in the lower leagues in England.
Not at all. No, you wouldn't. There's not many. I know it's only Champions League qualifiers, but when we went away to play Legia Warsaw, they had 25,000 there, and they were lunatics. They were lunatics. They didn't stop singing from the first whistle. You couldn't hear. You were shouting to your own teammate, and they couldn't hear you. You couldn't hear yourself think. They had the flares. They had everything, and people don't know that you've played in them games and witnessed them games. You know what I mean? It is a great experience. I think I was only 21, 22 at the time, and you're playing in front of that sort of fans, and it's not as if there was 20,000 there and they were silent, and it was just like a bit of a testimonial game. They wanted to win. They were the hardcore fans, and obviously you only have to go on YouTube and type in the team and the fans and what they get up to. They're unbelievable. Do you know what I mean?
For our North American audience to kind of give an idea of where the new Saints is located, while you were talking there, I was just kind of looking at my map, and it basically looks like it's right on the England-Wales border, and basically if you were in Tranmere and you went about 50 miles south, that's about how you would get there. Is that pretty accurate?
It's just in between. It's in between Wrexham and Shrewsbury, I'd say.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, it's just in between Wrexham and Shrewsbury on the on that road down there. Yeah, it's not far from the English border. Yeah, in towards Shrewsbury. We played Shrewsbury a few weeks ago away from home, and we drove past TNS. We drove past their ground. So yeah, it's just about 15-20 minutes from Shrewsbury, and about the same back to Wrexham.
We just always like to kind of give our listeners over here an idea of where some of these places that they might not have heard of are at. So.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, of course, with the English Welsh border, obviously there's that interaction of teams like Cardiff, Swansea, and Wrexham played in the English system. Yet there are smaller teams that play just in the Welsh league. So it's an interesting system, and I obviously for your career, it's given you some terrific highlights. I wanted to just sort of, as I mentioned, just talk about your time at AFC Fylde. You went up there and you played, I think, 3 seasons there, Sam?
Yeah.
How was your time there?
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. Yeah, we had a great set of lads that signed. I just wanted to get back into the English system, really. I felt like I'd fulfilled everything I could do in the Welsh League. You know what I mean? Like, we were winning the league comfortably every season, and you'd get into the Champions League qualifiers, which were great, but it was a very tough task to win the Champions League qualifiers because of the teams you're playing against. So it was a bit like a build-up to nothing type of thing, if you get what I mean. So
yeah,
just wanted to try and get back into the English system. And Dave Chalner, the manager at the time, phoned me and wanted to come and take me. They had to pay for me. I had a year left at my contract at TNS. They had to pay for me. I don't know what the figure was that they paid. It was an undisclosed fee, but when I met Dave Chalner and Fylde were talking big things. Like, obviously they have gone and done. I know they were struggling this season, but he was talking about the plan that they had in place to try and get in the Football League, and they were trying to copy Fleetwood, which was only down the road from them, and try and climb up the leagues and go through the non-league system and get into the Football League. And I obviously bought into it. We got beat in the playoff final first season there. Dion Charles, who now plays for Accrington, funny enough, was there. Missed an open goal in the last minute of extra time in the playoff final, which I like to remind him about quite a lot. But, and then we got beat by a team called North Ferriby, who folded as soon as they went up through the playoffs and went bust, which was a bit mad because the money system, the money obviously dried up, and the chairman said he couldn't afford to do it anymore, so the team went bust. So then it was a bit of a bitter pill to swallow because that could have been us. That we had everything in place. There was due to be a brand new ground, which is Fylde's ground now. That was due to get built the start of the following season. Everything was in place to go up, and fair play to North Ferriby. They beat us on the day, but then the club went bust. So then we were obviously arguing, saying, well, why can't we go up? But it wasn't to be, and we romped the league the year after. I think we won the league with 4 or 5 games to go the year after, and then had a season in the conference, which I enjoyed. I got made captain in the season in the conference, and we had the brand new grounds, all the facilities there, and they were trying to do it properly, and it was, I enjoyed my time there.
I've driven by the new stadium. It's a terrific looking stadium. I haven't been inside it, but it must be. I mean, obviously they've done it right, and it must be a nice place to play.
It is. The gym. I think he's just got the one stand behind the goal to finish, and then it'll be complete. But the big main stands where the changing rooms and all that are Championship, Premiership standard. To be honest with you, you've got a warm-up area in the changing rooms with the telly on and the showers. You've got the baths. You've got your cushioned seats. You've got your own lockers. He's done it properly. He spent a right few quid and he's done it properly. Yeah, it was a good place to play your football. It's obviously strange when it comes to Accrington, but I knew everything about Accrington before I went there. I knew what it was going to be like, and it's a very different place to Fyle, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I prefer the way it is at Accrington than I would at Fyle, because like the fair coat no knickers saying is pretty much sums that up, and I'd rather be with Accrington and be the underdog and be the fighters and look where we've come from. And I think that the whole club epitomises that, and it comes from the chairman at the very top, who's exactly the same as that. He knows his boundaries and his limits, and fair play to him. He's just from a council estate in Accrington himself and worked his way up, and he hasn't forgot himself, and it runs right through. It runs right through the club. It does.
It really does, and a big part of the club, in addition to Andy, is of course Peter Latham, who is the chairman of the Accrington Stanley Supporters Club, and he's also the one that usually arranges these interviews. And Peter is listening to all of these shows and has started sending us in some questions, and we've turned it into a little segment that we call Peter's Corner now, and I think that it's a good time to have Peter's Corner, because he did have one question here about kind of the differences between Fylde and Accrington, so I think it's a perfect time. One of the things that he wanted to ask was, when you were 25 years old, you became captain of AFC Fylde. At that point, did you think that your chance to play league football had passed by, or was your eye kind of still on that prize the whole time?
No, my eyes, I've never not been on playing league football and playing as high as I can. I'm not that type of player who'll just get comfortable, and I know what he's trying to say. You just become captain of the club. Did you want to stay at that club and lead them on to great things? Yeah, I did. But then when a club like Accrington comes in two leagues above, and I know it's obviously been publicised before about the money and things like that, and it didn't really bother me, because as it's been said before, I was getting offered a lot more, well, not a lot more money, but I was getting offered more money to stay in the conference, and I obviously chose to pick League One football over money. So no, it's always been my ambition to play as high as possible, and still is now.
Just to add on to what your question were from Peter there, Phil, and this is a quote from you in August of 2018. And the reason I want to read this is because how it hasn't changed from what you just told us. Well, you said I had a few offers to play in the Football League. Most offers in the National League, but I wanted to better myself, improve myself in the Football League. And that was your goal then. It's still your goal, obviously, to prove yourself.
Of course, yeah. And I don't think you'd ever stop trying to prove yourself, because in football you go through spells where, like Jordan Clarkson at the minute, where everything he touches turns to a goal, or every cross he puts in the box we get a goal from it. And then some months you might be down in the dumps, and it mightn't be going your way, and you might be struggling, or you might find yourself out the team. So you can't never stop proving yourself in football. I think it boils down to professionalism and pride in yourself, and going out and giving your all no matter what. Even if you're not having a good game, you still give it 100%. Things don't always go right for you. We're not perfect. No one's perfect. You see it at the top level. You see it in the Premier League. Players make some mistakes. It's just how you react from them mistakes and how you turn them into positive. So yeah, I think you're always trying to prove yourself, and whether it's prove your own manager, your own players, your fans, you're always trying to prove yourself. Even like my dad. My dad doesn't miss a home game and goes to most away games. He doesn't even go and watch Liverpool anymore. He's given a season ticket up to a relative for now. Obviously, it'll be my season ticket when I finish playing football, but there's a relative who's got that season ticket for now, and my dad comes and watches every game he can, and I've got to prove myself to him because he's probably one of my harshest critics as well. He's there every game, and he'll tell me if I didn't play very well, or he'll always praise me if I did play well. So yeah, I think you've always got to prove yourself no matter what you do.
That's great that you have that support system there with your family behind you, and that's something that I think we've found with just about everybody that we've talked to from Accrington Stanley is just the whole family atmosphere of the club. It's just it's so much different, like you said, than any other place in football, and that's why there's just so many good quality people that play and are involved with Accrington. And one of the other things that Peter did want me to ask you about, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but he was wanting to know if the strong Scouse influence at the club made it easier for you to transition into Stanley B from Liverpool yourself.
To be honest with you, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know a single player. Let me think. When I first come to on the first side for Accrington, there would have been Scotty, Mark Hughes would have been there, Sean McConville would have been there. I didn't know anyone. I'd heard of obviously the gaffer. I'd heard of Jimmy Bell. I'd heard of Accrington. I've heard of the club the way it was, but I didn't know anyone at the club. I just got a phone call from my agent, and it was pretty late, to be honest with you. I was scrambling around thinking, what do I do here? I don't want to stay in the conference. I was on him all the summer, asking him to try and get me a football league club, and he worked his socks off trying to get it, but obviously I wasn't proven in the football league, so it was a gamble for both sides really. It was a gamble for me to jump down on the money side of it, because I know people say money's not everything, but it helps when it comes to paying bills and having families and things like that. It helps on that side.
It's your livelihood.
It was a gamble for Accrington to sign me, because it was all right. I'd done well. I've got a decent pedigree in my background from where I've come from, and I've been playing in the conference, but it was 2 leagues above. I was jumping up 2 leagues into League One, which is at the time at the likes of your Sunderlands and your Portsmouths and your Charltons and your Lutons and your Barnsleys in it. So it was a gamble for the club to take on me as well, but obviously I'd like to think it was one that paid off both sides.
Well, it sure seems that way. But I mean, you've started over 50 games now since you've come over. So
yeah.
I was just going to add on John Coleman. One of the things that he said when he was signing you or looking at you in June 2018, he said, we can't give him the riches, but we can give him a platform to go and better himself. And he said, I like that in a player. And obviously he saw something in you that fit the family and the desire of Stanley, and obviously the character you had. So I think you fit the bill for his type of player. It just gave you the opportunity to go out and show yourself.
Yeah, it did. It worked perfectly. As I said, I didn't really know. I'd heard stories about Accrington and how it was run, but I didn't really know how I was going to be accepted. And I was accepted brilliantly into the group. Obviously, it does help with people from Liverpool as well, because it's your own people and whatever. And I remember, I'll never forget the chat I had with the gaffer when we were playing. I think it was about 15 games in my first season. We were playing Walsall away, and he pulled me on the pitch before the game, and he was giving me a bit of a pep talk about how he wants me to not let me standards drop and things like that. Keep doing what you're doing, because I've just got a little run in the side then. I wasn't starting at first when I first signed in my first season, and I just got cemented my place type of thing, and I just got in the side. And he said, look, I'm disappointed from my own side that I didn't pick you up earlier. He said it's bad management and bad scouting technique, if you like. He said, with you being from Liverpool, how I haven't come across you before. And that was nice to hear, because obviously that means that he rates me and he thinks I was doing well. And he's disappointed that he hasn't got hold of me earlier, and I would have played league football a lot earlier than than it did too. So that was lovely to hear from the gaffer. Yeah, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, nice words. I think that says a lot about John Coleman.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, he's a top fella, and I've been there and I've seen what's gone on with players who've moved on. I know I've only been there 2 seasons. A season and a half. Jimmy Bell always jokes and says that it feels like I've been here for 10 seasons, but obviously I haven't. And I've seen players who've the likes of your Cadens and your Janois and players who've moved on before, and I've seen it happen. And the gaffer, as he said in that statement that he read out in 2018, Accrington can't give you riches, but it can give you a football club that you'll love, and you'll run through brick walls for the staff, the other players, and the fans. Every player that'll put that shirt on will run through brick walls for all 3 of them, and wherever it takes you, it takes you. The rest is down to you, to be honest with you. I think that sums the club up, really, the philosophy of the club.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, everything you just said is everything that Accrington Stanley, to a person, every single person we talk to with the club is just, like you said, willing to run through a wall for the badge. And I think that's something that Tony has definitely asked a lot of guys about. Is just what the badge means. And now, Tony, did you have anything else that we wanted to ask Sam before we got to the really serious part of the show?
I think we've covered all the things that I wanted to touch on, and Sam's added quite a bit more too, which is great. But I'm ready to get into the fun section of the session. Okay, this is the section, Sam, we call, well, it started out as rapid fire section where we had about 2 or 3 questions. I think we're renaming it to the almost rapid fire because it's expanded to about 9 or 10 questions. But we'll give it a shot. It's just some fun, and it's I'll do the Northern England twist, and then we'll turn it over to Phil for some North American flavor.
No problem.
Okay, and I think I know the answer to this one. Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Mushy or garden peas?
Mushy.
Red or brown sauce on your bacon butty?
Brown.
And this is for Mark Hughes. Red or white wine?
Red. Only because of Mark Hughes.
Good.
He got me on the red wine.
Good man. With your full English, with or without black pudding?
Without.
On the soap operas, Coronation Street or EastEnders?
Neither.
And from Sean McConville, and we all know the answer to this one, but Sean wanted us to put it in. Natural grass or AstroTurf? Natural
grass. That AstroTurf's no good to anyone.
Yeah, that's 100% on that one. Everybody says natural grass.
And now, Phil, you want to go ahead with your North American questions?
Okay, well, the first one isn't North American, but so Tony asked the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, but I was saying that most of the guys that are of playing age probably grew up with the debate Oasis or Blur. So Oasis or Blur, who's your pick there?
Oasis all day long.
I'm right with you on that one.
Have we had anybody say Blur? Have we had anybody pick Blur at all, Phil?
Just Aaron.
Well, he doesn't count as a player, so.
Aaron is our Australian co-host that he also lived in London, so he got brainwashed by the Blur crowds.
yeah. So he must have asked to put that question in because that's no comparison to me. Like,
no, not at all.
All right, and then these are the North American ones. Tony is originally from Accrington, but he now lives in Toronto. They have a famous Canadian food dish that he thinks would be a hit in Lancashire. It's called poutine, which is chips, gravy, and cheese curds. Is this something you'd be interested in trying?
Chips, gravy, and what? Cheese what?
It's like cheese curd. It's just sort of a cheese that's twisted into strips.
Basically, cut up your string cheese and drop it into gravy.
I'm not too sure about it in Liverpool. Like it might take off an Ashton. I'm not sure. I can't comment.
Well, then
gravy on its own will be all right.
Then what we have, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and we like hot and spicy foods here. We put jalapeno peppers on our pepperoni pizza. Would you like to add jalapeno peppers to your pepperoni pizza?
No thanks. The pepperoni is hot enough for me.
All right, and we have one last one that was recently added by Darren Woodhead, and there's a long backstory to this that we won't get into, but it is: do you prefer Whitney Houston or Dolly Parton?
It's a tough one. I'll go Whitney.
Whitney, okay. Is that all of them? Did I get all of them there, Tony?
I think you did. I think, yes. As I said, it started out with, I think, just the two mushy peas and the red sauce one, and we've kind of, it's kind of taken on.
Adding their own. Did you have one that you wanted to add in, Sam? Any great debates going on in Liverpool that we could add into there?
Should the league be cancelled, or should they let Liverpool win the league?
That's a good question.
Well, that one's gonna get some people fired up. Tony, what's your thought on that?
I hope they don't cancel the season. I hope they can get it played and Liverpool win it fair and square, and so there's no asterisk beside it. But that's a tough one. That is a tough one.
I heard that.
I think it's not really a debate. It just depends what goes on with this virus, isn't it? Really, it's just that's all that keeps getting said at the moment. I think everyone's against Liverpool winning the league, so everyone just keeps trying to say null and void the league. It's the best way to be and things like that. But
I don't agree with that.
No, there's no way. I mean, I heard yesterday they're planning to, I guess, in June and July, put all the Premier League players into like a quarantine and then have them play the 92 remaining games at empty stadiums in the Midlands, all at different times, and televise them all. I hope
seen that. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, behind closed doors. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my vote, is for them to figure a way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that'd still be obviously a bit disappointing for us not to be in the ground to watch us lift the trophy. For I haven't seen them. That's the only trophy I haven't seen Liverpool lift. But obviously, if that's the safest and best way to do it, then that's the way it's going to be done. It's a lot better. It's a lot better than cancelling the league. Like, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that anything that gets us to get the games played, we want to be there. But at the end of the day, what they're talking about is 92 games all on TV, and if I'm not allowed to leave my house, 92 games on TV sounds all right to me.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. Yeah. You mightn't go down well with the misses, like, but.
Did you? I was just going to ask. I hear that Jimmy Bell likes to do some trivia questions. Does he do that on the bus or on the coach coming back, or does he like to dabble in that with the players? Quiz questions.
He does it. He does it on Thursdays and Fridays. He doesn't do it every week. It's just whatever mood he's in. If he's in a good mood, he'll do it. If he's in a bad, so he hasn't done it lately because he's always in a bad mood. But
I've got one for you. You can ask him, and it involves Accrington playing Everton in the first football league match in 1888. Ask him which stadium it was played in.
Accrington v Everton in 1888. What stadium was it played in?
Yeah. Do you know the answer?
No.
Believe it or not, it was Anfield.
Wow.
Anfield. So that is a good one. If he gets that one, he knows his stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's a good one, Tony.
Yeah, I'll WhatsApp it over to him when we finish on the phone and see what his reply is.
Yeah, because Everton played at Anfield, and then they had a dispute over the lease. and left the stadium, and then Liverpool FC was formed to take the place of Everton at Anfield.
I know.
Anyway, it's just something you could throw at Jimmy Bell to see.
I will. I'll ask him.
All right, I was just gonna say we're getting real close to an hour here. We really appreciate you coming on, Sam, but we don't want to take up your whole day here. But before we did wrap up, was there anything else that we hadn't asked you about that you wanted to make sure we talked about today?
No, that's pretty much been everything. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thanks very much for
we have too.
Yeah, it's been a great time. I really enjoyed it. It's just like having a chat with a mate and you talk football. And it's been as I say, it's been a lot of fun and some insight. And we wish you continued success.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll be back on whenever you need me or whenever.
Fantastic.
If you're not bored of my voice, then I'll come on whenever you want, lads.
Well, we'll have to make a plan to do that, and we'll definitely have you on again. And once again, we just wanted to say most important thing, stay safe, keep your family safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you back out on the pitch again. And Peter did tell me that you recently signed an extension through 2021, so you're going to at least be with Accrington a couple more years, so we really look forward to seeing that.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for your time, lads. Stay safe yourselves, yeah.
Yeah, be safe, be well.
Okay,
thanks, Sam.
take it easy. Thanks very much. Speak to you soon.
On Stanley on.
Yeah, good lads.